Well, thank you all for being here, and thanks, Noah, for the introduction. I am, of course, Dr. Jonathan Elissa. I am the branch chief and the poultry pathologist here at the Avian Health and Food Safety Laboratory. And yeah, I'm going to be giving this talk here for how to protect poultry, your backyard poultry. I start with this disclaimer. This presentation, including its text, graphics, images, is for educational purposes. It's not intended to be a substitute for veterinary medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are having an active problem with your flock, seek a veterinarian, a licensed veterinary medical professional for assistance. This presentation does not substitute for that diagnosis. So to get started, I'm trying to cover a lot of material here, but I want to start out with a little bit of an exercise to help understand a little bit about disease spread in a flock, within a flock. And then I'll talk about poultry management as the bulk of the talk and end it with the question of if my flock is sick, now what? So I'll start with the question, what's wrong with my bird? It's one that I get asked a fair amount of times. I get a call and they want to know what happened to their bird. Why is it sick? Why did it die? And they'll ask, is it contagious, or are my other birds at risk? And these two questions, is it contagious? Are my other birds at risk? Sound very similar, but they are not the same. And the next section kind of goes to parse out a little bit of what that means and how disease can be managed based on kind of what is happening in the flock. So I'll start with the contagious disease as an example. I have, depiction of a flock here, 12 chickens. Let's say you get another chicken into your flock and it carries a disease on it, let's say mycoplasma, something that is infectious and contagious. As it interacts with the other birds, if it wasn't quarantined and just kind of in with the other birds, another bird might start showing signs, and as time passes, it can spread into more and more birds. And in that manner, it is spreading bird-to-bird transmission throughout the flock. If a disease is just an individual bird issue, it's something that's not contagious, then it's something that might affect just one bird. It might be a spontaneous disease that kind of popped up, let's say age-related or something, but that one bird is not increasing the risk of any other bird contracting that disease. And so that's what a lot of people, of course, are hoping for when a necropsy is submitted, trying to see, is it just a one bird problem or is the rest of the flock at risk? Another example, if we have the flock split into two, let's say they're in two different environments, and one of the houses, let's say the one on the right, is in an environment that has higher moisture content, whether the coop doesn't ventilate very well or it floods easier around that area. But let's say that it gets quite damp and is great environment for mold growth. You might see that out of that set of birds, a couple start showing signs of illness, whereas the other birds that you have in a different coop, not in that environment, might be just fine. So the mold growth, let's say in this case aspergillosis, it's not something that actually goes from bird to bird. Just because one bird is affected doesn't mean that any other bird is more at risk. But by being in this environment that has a higher risk of contracting the disease, If you let it stand long enough, more birds might contract the disease, making it look like it's a contagious disease when it is not. The risk factors and the risk to the birds is present through the environment. So another example I'm pulling up, let's say our flock is not just hens, but now we have a mixed flock, a turkey in this case, and then also a couple roosters in here. There are diseases that can affect poultry and not actually show signs in some species, and then uh, cause actual disease, clinical disease, and manifest in other species. In this case, let's take the example of blackhead. Chickens are more resistant to it, whereas turkeys can actually succumb to the disease. So risk is not the same for each species. Same way with whether you have roosters and hens. There are certain things, and let's say, for example, nutritionally, hens need to lay eggs and they need the calcium reserves to do so, and that's supplemented through the nutrition. If roosters are only eating a hen's diet, formulated hen's diet, all of their life, as they get older, that can get hard on the kidneys, and the roosters themselves might start to exhibit some signs of disease if that is the only nutrition source available to them. So again, risk factors based on management and environment. Not a disease that is contagious, but you can have multiple birds affected based on what the circumstances are. Another example that has to do with nutrition, but also behavior. Birds, if you have birds, you know that there is a pecking order. You might have a bird that is the head honcho and gets first pick at the feeder, or the treats, the scratch feed and everything might kind of push the other birds aside. And you might even have a bird that is getting bullied, kind of the bottom of the hierarchy, maybe a little bit scared of all the other birds and thus, kept away from food. And if there isn't quite enough food for it to feel comfortable to get to, not having that appropriate nutrition can set it up to be more likely to contract a disease. And similarly, even though the head honcho bird is getting as much nutrition as it wants, there are circumstances where they are only getting treat foods, maybe packing on a little bit too much fat, and in doing so is opening it up to possible disease and or death. So it's possible even for the very large bird to contract a disease. So summarizing this first portion, contagious diseases are not the only important diseases. There are many more. Depending on the circumstances, many birds can be at risk from non-contagious or non-infectious diseases. And management, depending on what is going on, it can be preventative and protective to the flock. It's just very important to identify the cause of what is happening, what is causing the disease, and how might you be able to change or tweak management to prevent it in the other birds and reduce risk of it happening in other birds. So here's a slide that I feel most people really wanted to see. What are common causes of disease in backyard poultry? And there's a lot here, and this is not a comprehensive list. There are many more diseases that can affect poultry, and I don't quite have the time to actually go through every disease and tell you about each one, but I will revisit this slide and kind of let you know how different management and biosecurity and et cetera can help prevent these illnesses from getting onto your farm in the first place. So with that, I'll get into management. If you have poultry, I'm sure that you are going through all of these different sections of poultry management, whether you're actively thinking about it or not. I just want to bring these to the forefront, talk a little bit about them so that you can really kind of inspect what you're doing and how these different factors of poultry management can help prevent disease in your flock. So I will start by saying that I can't give specific management recommendations because everyone has differences on how they raise their flock. What infrastructure do they have? Every coop is different. Where do you live, and what the conditions are there? And then the goals of the flock, because bird that's purely raised for companion purposes is not going to be the same as a bird that's raised for egg or meat production, or let's say hatching, breeding, or for show. It's possible that you can intertwine and have multiple, say that it's a companion show bird, but depending on circumstances, how you manage the birds can change. So I'm not giving any specific management recommendations. I'm just giving a pretty general basic overview of things to think about in managing your birds. So feed is very important. The intended bird type is extremely important, as I went through from the very beginning, or in the example flock, having a feed that is not intended for a certain species can cause disease. And so you want to make sure that you're matching your birds, the formulated diet that you have, to what kinds of birds that you have, and also their life stage, because a chick feed is going to be very different from, say, a layer feed. It's also important to think about the total intake of the diet to the bird. General recommendation is that 90% of the feed your birds get should be a formulated diet, and then the other 10% can be treats such as scratch grains or table scraps or other sort of foods. Another general recommendation, if you're not comfortable eating it, it's probably not a great idea for birds to have it. So, if it's something like a scrap or a leftover or something, sure, but be very careful, and also make sure you're not feeding something toxic or something that's spoiled, etc. Also be aware of what the birds might be able to get into in their foraging space, and if there's inorganic material that they can get into. For example, if they're layers, grit and pebbles and whatnot is normal for them to get into, but you sure don't want them to, say, swallow a nickel or something that's not supposed to be in there. And then as a biosecurity caveat, I'm going to get a lot more information about biosecurity out later, but you really want to feed your birds and not everything else around. If your bird leaves and the food is on the ground or just easily accessible, you might start seeing bugs appear. You might have some rodents or even other birds. You don't really want to attract these different sorts of pests into your system, because they can introduce disease. They can carry things into the flock that you don't want. So making sure that birds are fed in a manner that deters pests is very important. Light is another management factor. Natural light is great, but if you are looking to increase your egg production, you might be looking at putting in artificial light. And if you do, it's just important to note that you do not want to use shatterproof or Teflon coated bulbs. If those overheat, you can actually aerosolize that Teflon, and that can be toxic to birds. It's the same issue if you heard of with the Teflon coated pans. So just be careful not to have those style light bulbs in your coop, just in case, so that they don't overheat. This photo, I think, is from Gainesville, Georgia. I've never been to that festival, but looks like fun with a chicken like that. Air is another important factor of management that in a backyard setting, I'm not sure that many people really think too much about, but it is important to make sure that you have some sort of solution. Temperature is very important. You don't want to cause heat stress and you don't want to cause cold stress on your birds. And ventilation in trying to make sure it's not getting too humid and it's not able to build up components of the air such as ammonia. Just making sure that you have some sort of ventilation system is very important, and making sure that it is able to work properly as intended. Water is also extremely important, and I love this photo as an example of something I hate to see. You can imagine that the water that this photo of a chicken is drinking from is quite dirty and probably has a lot of bacteria in there. It is important to provide clean water and to clean those water containers frequently so that it's not able to build up bacteria or anything else, mold, etc. And it doesn't really matter what kind of drinker you have, jug drinker, fount drinkers, nipple drinkers, or drinker cups. Just make sure that no matter which type it is, they're still getting cleaned on a regular basis, and that birds that are being introduced to that water system, especially for, say, nipple drinkers, that they actually know that water is there and available and they can access it. And then, again, coming back to this photo, don't let water pool in the foraging grounds and the areas that birds can get to, because you don't want them drinking from these sorts of spaces. And as I'm sure some people have issues with, you always know that if there is something you don't want a bird to do, that's exactly what they're going to do. So best to make sure they just don't have access to these sorts of dirty puddles, and just make sure that their water is clean. And speaking of cleaning, we have cleaning and sanitizing, or cleaning and disinfecting. I took this slide on the left from Michigan State University, so you know that I'm not crazy in saying that cleaning is extremely important, and sanitizing or disinfecting should happen after the cleaning is done. You cannot clean a dirty surface. Organic material is going to deactivate or inactivate the disinfectant. So if you are going to try to clean and disinfect, that cleaning part is imperative to get done first and foremost, and done well. Cleaning the coop is important. Don't let the feces pile up. Don't let the bedding get wet or moldy. Again, these are ways that bacteria can get into an optimal environment and kind of flourish when you don't want it to. Clean pest control devices if you use those. That can include insect traps or rodent traps. And then for disinfection, again, make sure that you clean first. And if you are using equipment, sharing equipment between different species, say if you have a turkey flock and a chicken flock kept separately, make sure to clean and disinfect whatever equipment you're bringing between the two so that you don't bring something from the chickens over to the turkeys or vice versa. And the same thing if you have friends or family who also have birds, backyard flocks. If there's anything that's going to be entering the space of the birds that they can have direct contact with it, just make sure that you clean and disinfect it before bringing it in, just to make sure that you're not bringing something from the outside in inadvertently. And that kind of brings me into space. Make sure that you're giving enough space. You don't want to overcrowd the birds. Don't overcrowd the coop. I do like this picture just because it has that outside fence. By providing that sort of fencing, you know what space they are able to forage, and it becomes much easier to know what is available for them in that space. And by knowing what's in there, you can make sure that you can keep out toxic substances, anything that could pop a tire, any sharp substances or nails, screws, etc. But also by doing so, you're of course keeping out predators and everything. So I like that idea of having a perimeter that they can forage within without being entirely free range and questioning, not knowing what they might be able to get into, say, in a neighbor's yard or in some unknown space. And it's also important to fix damaged equipment so that they're not able to hurt themselves on any, say, chicken wire fence that is broken and sharp, things like that. Vaccination. That's one of the points that was on the poultry management diagram that I had. And there's one vaccination that I highly recommend for all chickens, and that is the Marek's disease vaccination. That one should be done as soon after hatch as possible, so optimally done at the hatchery day one. Vaccination is typically is a targeted prevention, and it typically targets those diseases that are infectious and contagious. However, in backyard situations, it's very important to be careful about vaccine use and consult with a veterinarian if you are actually looking to vaccinate any further than that Marek's disease vaccination. There are a number of vaccines that are used in the poultry industry. However, since they're targeted towards the industry, the dosing is at a scale that's very difficult to bring down to just singular doses for a backyard sort of environment. It's very, very easy to either underdose in trying to get such a small amount or very quickly overdose by getting many times more doses than you intend. And based on the vaccine, if it is a live vaccine, that could cause some pretty prominent issues in the potentially vaccinated bird. So be very careful about it. And if you are looking for a specific vaccine, I would consult with a veterinarian before attempting so. And it's always a good idea to keep your vaccination history. So if it's a Marek's disease vaccine, just having that information is great. If you do go further than that, just knowing what vaccines were used is always helpful. Service. This is the fun part of working with birds, I would think, of the entire management part. It's just spend time with your birds, check their feed, check their water while you're in the pen with them. And you can look at the pen space and the bedding, make sure that there's not things there that aren't supposed to, make sure that the feces, the manure isn't building up too much. While you're there, you can kind of listen to your birds, make sure that they're making the sounds that they normally do, and you don't have birds that are acting oddly or too quiet or starting to cough, sneeze, or show any other respiratory sign. It's also good to pick up your birds and kind of get an idea of their weight. If you actually weigh them or not, I can understand if you have a number of birds, it might be a little bit difficult to get actual numbers on them. But if you're able to get an idea of how much they weigh, and can also feel their muscling, you can get an idea of their body condition. You can't really get an idea of their body condition just from their sight or from looking at them because their feathers and their plumage covers up their body pretty well. So if you actually pick up your birds, feel their weight, kind of feel their muscle, you get a better idea of how they're doing. And over time, you get an idea of how things are kind of changing. You can also take a look at their vent space and see if they have evidence of mice or light, or not mice, mites or lice or pasting around the vent that might indicate, say, diarrhea. And then biosecurity. Biosecurity is a huge topic, and distilled down, it's really the question of how can disease enter from the outside and what steps can be taken to mitigate those that introduction of the disease. There are resources available from USDA Defend the Flock. I'm going to be going through a number of their recommendations. And then there's also the NPIP 14 biosecurity principles. That's geared more towards the industry, but it's all very good information. And I have this photo here for avian influenza and how it spread from wild birds into poultry and continued kind of spreading. And biosecurity is really just trying to stop those arrows, stop those introductions from one place to another, make sure that it just isn't able to spread. So I'll start with just talking a little bit about the NPIP. It's the National Poultry Improvement Plan. The Defend the Flock program references NPIP. So just a little bit of background for it. It was established to eradicate Salmonella Puyallup typhoid from the poultry industry, and it was very successful in doing so. Since it had eradicated Salmonella Puyallup typhoid from the poultry industry, they've expanded to create more monitored and clean classifications for other diseases such as mycoplasma and avian influenza. But it is an entirely voluntary program, and it is producer and industry led. So if you want to be part of the NPIP, you can take a look into it. They have requirements on testing that needs to be done to show that the flock is clean of Salmonella Puyallup typhoid. And if you want the other classifications as well, they can look into those: mycoplasma, avian influenza, etc. So it's also integrated with state agricultural agencies. So, if you acquire chicks from an NPIP hatchery in a different state, they'll be able to move into your state, your flock, without an issue of importation anyways. So biosecurity, and I do really want to stress that biosecurity is extremely important. It is probably the largest way of keeping your flock keeping diseases off of your property out of your flock, as well as keeping neighboring flocks safe, because it works both ways by trying to keep outside diseases out, and by, if you do for some reason contract a disease in your flock, making sure that it doesn't spread outside of your flock. So it's extremely important for both keeping your birds safe as well as your neighbors' birds safe. And this slide, I took it right from the Defend the Flock, USDA Defend the Flock program. I'm going to be running through a lot of their slides and just kind of saying a little bit about each one. This one is pretty much saying that everyone has a responsibility in biosecurity, and it is a continuous affair. So one of the points is don't haul diseases home. To me, this is anything that your bird is going to be able to get into contact with, you're going to want to clean and disinfect. Your car and whatnot, if you live near a poultry facility, it might not be a bad idea to wash down your car to make sure that you don't track something from the road or from the area over to your home. And I have seen, of course, not only, industry, but backyard flocks that are free roaming, just, flocks in the street. And it can be very easy for a car to run through manure and bring something, track that to where your destination is. So making sure that you clean anything that you're bringing into your flock, wherever your flock can access, is one of the parts of biosecurity. Wearing separate gear when caring for your poultry. This one is, I feel like, an easier way of just having dedicated clothing, dedicated shoes, maybe a set of coveralls or something that you wear when you go and work with your poultry. This way you don't have to clean and disinfect your shoes that you're wearing outside and potentially able to track in. If you just have a completely separate set of shoes that are just for working with your birds, that'll help keep the outside out and make sure that your birds are only really interacting with what is in the space that they occupy. Wildfowl can carry disease, so of course trying to keep wild birds away. This is extremely important for avian influenza, but any way that you can set up a line of separation, to have some way to have your birds separated from outside birds, will help keep diseases away. Many diseases need some sort of contact from a bird to another, or from manure of birds to a flock. So if you can set up some sort of perimeter and make sure that within your perimeter you are deterring those outside elements, that will help. So again, creating a line of separation, having some sort of way to monitor where your birds have access to. This is the slide talking about NPIP. Purchasing poultry from NPIP participants will help in making sure that you're not bringing in a disease from a breeder flock. There are diseases that can spread from mother hen straight through the egg and into the newly hatched chick. So NPIP has, the certification for Puyallup typhoid that will make sure that doesn't get spread into your flock. And they have a couple other ones if they have that certification. If the flock owner, the breeder flock that you were getting the chicks from, if that hatchery has the mycoplasma certification as well, and otherwise. So sourcing from NPIP is important as well. At least it is recommended. Yeah. Quarantining new additions to your flock prior to integrating them. Again, for the first example that I had of a contagious disease, it can be very easy to introduce new disease by bringing a new bird home and not monitoring or testing for diseases. So if you do bring a new bird home, it's always a good idea to quarantine them for a period of time. That way you get to see if they might exhibit signs of disease, or otherwise if you submit tests for the laboratory to tell you if they have evidence of being actively infected with a disease that they might spread to the rest of your flock. Separate the poultry house from potential disease sources. Again, anything that comes into contact with your birds, anything that they can directly interact with, just clean it and disinfect it before bringing it into your birds. If you get new feeding system, or anything that you might bring in equipment wise, just a quick clean and disinfection helps keep biosecurity going. And then, of course, service element. If you're interacting with your birds, if you start seeing that they're acting oddly, report an unexplained illness or death. And that way you can contact your veterinarian, try to figure out what's going on sooner rather than waiting for many birds to be affected. This one's a perimeter buffer area. It's same idea as the line of separation. If you have a space that the birds can access and a pretty distinct line as to an area that they cannot access, that helps in making sure that they can't get to places that might have disease. And then everyone who is in contact with the flock is responsible in part for biosecurity. So if you have friends, neighbors, family, whoever who interact with your birds, trying to make sure that the biosecurity rules that you follow are also being followed by any visitors is very important, because again, they are from the outside, and you might know where you've been, but you don't know everything about where your visitor might have been. So it is very important to make sure that if they're coming in contact with your birds, try to make sure that they're following the same biosecurity rules. This is pretty much the same way. Everyone has a role in keeping poultry healthy. Mortality is a fact of having chickens. Flock deaths do happen. Make sure that when they do happen, they're removed from the flock as soon as possible. It is possible for them to increase the risk of all of the other surviving birds the longer they are left in allowing the rest of the flock direct contact. So remove mortality as soon as possible. Yeah, same thing with manure and litter. Make sure it's not built up too much. Make sure that you can clean it out, and that you're sourcing your litter from reputable sources and not just from, say, a neighbor who has birds. But if you're able to get litter from a company that actually provides litter, that would be better to make sure you're not bringing in disease or a toxin of some sort that might affect your birds. Make sure you have a clean water supply. Same thing, make sure that your feed supply is clean and that you are not letting pests, rodents and birds, etc., get to the feed even before it gets to the chickens. And then there are the NPIP biosecurity, 14 points of biosecurity that you can reference as well. So again, here's that slide of causes of diseases in backyard poultry. Again, there's a lot of them, but Marek's disease has a vaccination that, again, highly recommended for all chickens to get that vaccination. Lymphoid leukosis is something that you can mitigate by acquiring birds from a trusted hatchery and by practicing good biosecurity. These nutritional diseases are, of course, nutritional management, making sure that you have a formulated diet for the correct bird type. Predation is having the biosecurity and keeping those predators out. Pecking and harassment from your own flock is making sure that they have the appropriate space, they're not overcrowded. And you can have some behavior management, making sure that they do have some foraging and they have ways to kind of satisfy their curiosity without turning to bullying each other. And same thing, having enough feeder space and water space, etc. Ventilation and sanitation really helps on the sanitary, on the respiratory side, as well as biosecurity for all of these infectious diseases. Mycoplasma, again, is another one that you would want a trusted hatchery for. Septicemia is, again, biosecurity and sanitation. Parasites are mitigated by biosecurity. And there are some things on this list that can just happen spontaneously. Some of them are associated with risk factors, and it all really depends on the management situation and what risk factors are present on in the particular flock. So you can kind of see how there are a lot of different diseases that can cause issues in backyard flocks, but by doing various elements, focusing on various elements of poultry management and biosecurity, you can mitigate a lot of these. You can outright prevent a lot, and other ones you can make sure that if they do get onto the farm, the risk factors are accounted for, and thus reduce the risk in the rest of the birds that are not affected. So ending part of this conversation, your flock is sick, now what? What signs do you look for? Respiratory signs include sneezing, nasal discharge, watery eyes, puffing around the eyes, swelling around the eyes, and all of those sorts of like wheezing or gurgling sounds. You can also, by this photo, it says lower egg production. If you are tracking how much your flock lays, that is something, a pretty common early sign of disease if there's a sudden drop in egg production. But of course, be careful to note if they're just going into a molt or the daylight is reducing, etc. Neurological signs such as wry neck, stargazing, or head tremors. This picture is of quote unquote stargazing. Lameness, such as the splayed leg or a chicken that's unwilling to walk. There are some other ones to look for: weight loss, diarrhea, penguin-like walk, and you, as the owner of your backyard flock, will know your birds better than anyone else. So if you interact with your birds, just in the daily flock service that you do, keep an eye out, keep an ear out for if they're acting any differently, if they're lethargic, if they're sitting puffed up, if they're not exhibiting their normal behaviors. And then write it down. When did the symptoms start? How many birds are having those signs? These are important things to have on hand for if you start a conversation with a veterinarian or otherwise are looking for help with a diagnosis. You can take pictures. That is always helpful. I do appreciate when I get pictures to see what things look like when a bird is alive with the symptom. You can take videos, and birds are also really good at hiding symptoms. So again, by interacting with your birds, you can get a little bit better feel for it instead of just kind of seeing the bird from afar. If you're actually interacting with them, you get to see if their behavior is different or if they, move a little bit and start to wheeze after a little bit of exertion. So interacting with your birds is really important in helping identify different signs of disease. And then sick birds, if you do identify that they are sick, separate them from the flock. You can provide supportive care, namely in the form of providing individual, essentially a private supply of feed and water for your sick birds so that they aren't going to be, they don't have to compete with the rest of the flock, making sure that you can track how much water they're drinking. And then otherwise, if you do seek veterinary care, any sorts of treatments recommended by a veterinarian. Diagnostics are possible. I would consult with your veterinarian to see what sorts of diagnostics you would like to do. There are many different tests that can be run, and some things should definitely be run in order to rule out specific causes of disease. So if your birds are showing signs of sickness and you really want to figure out what it is, I would highly recommend working with a veterinarian. It's also very important, again, to have good biosecurity. As I had said earlier, biosecurity works both ways, trying to keep disease out of your flock. But if for some reason your flock does get sick, you are helping prevent it from spreading to other flocks. So keeping your neighbors' flocks safe by practicing good biosecurity on your part. It's also, of course, very important for your neighbors to be practicing good biosecurity. But if everyone practices biosecurity, those are multiple layers of protection that an organism would need to get through in order to cause disease in another flock. So I really want to stress through this conversation that biosecurity is extremely important, and it is, again, the best way of keeping your flock and your neighbors' flock safe from these infectious diseases, contagious infectious diseases. Mortality, again, death is a part of life. Birds will pass away over time, and it's very important to remove the mortality so that they don't, the surviving birds do not have access to that, to the mortality. If you want to determine the cause of death, there are options available. At my laboratory, at the Avian Health and Food Safety Laboratory, I perform necropsies to try to determine the cause of death and try to see what the risks are to the rest of the flock. If the bird passed away from a individual bird issue, or if there are other risk factors, or if it is potentially a contagious pathogen. So veterinary care and diagnostics, how do you manage what you don't know? You really can't. You should find out what is going on. So if you have birds that you want to get a diagnosis for and you want to keep those birds alive, keep your flock intact, I would highly recommend seeking veterinary care. See a veterinarian. They can run tests or send out tests for diagnostics to try to get an answer while keeping your bird alive or trying to provide treatment to keep your flock healthy. If it is a little bit far gone, diagnostic services are available at laboratories such as the Avian Health and Food Safety Laboratory. However, we do not practice clinical medicine. I do not work with live birds that I give back. I work with birds that are already passed away. And I also work with diagnostic samples such as swabs or blood serum samples, etc. So I do not work directly with live birds, but I'm a great option if birds have already passed away. By performing a necropsy, you get typically more information than you would out of a live bird because you can get a much more in-depth test done. So through the necropsy. So if you are looking for a diagnosis, I would highly recommend going to a veterinarian if you're looking to keep your bird alive, or through the diagnostic services at a laboratory if it's already a little far gone and you want to know what happened and how much at risk the rest of your flock is. And supplements and home remedies. I've heard a lot of different supplements and home remedies. My general recommendation is just to keep a very close eye on your flock. It's always good to know what their water consumption is like before and after you give the supplement. There are some supplements that you can add to the feed or to the water, and in certain dosages, the birds will eat more or drink more, which is good, but if you go too far, it can actually back them off of feed or water, and you don't really want to make them not want to eat or drink. So make sure that whatever supplement you're giving, it is not adversely affecting their feed or water consumption or their behaviors of how they're trying to find feed or water. I would also recommend that if a supplement is labeled for some sort of invasive procedure, such as injection, I would consult a veterinarian before providing the treatment to ensure that this is something that's not going to hurt. And I have seen at least a product that has recommended using a swab to kind of insert the supplement into a sinus area, which I would not quite recommend, as introducing things to a place where it's not supposed to be does not sound like a very healthy treatment for a bird. So I would again consult with your veterinarian to see what the situation is, what the supplement is, and if it's necessary, if it is going to be an invasive procedure. I would also be remiss not to talk about avian influenza. Avian influenza is, of course, in America. It's been in America since 2021 for this current outbreak. This map is wild bird detections, and you can see that most of Washington has had wild bird detection since 2021. Signs of avian influenza are sudden unexpected mortality or severe lethargy in your flock. So birds that are down, not really willing to move. They might have a lot of edema or discharge, watery eyes, nasal discharge, etc. But waterfowl may not be symptomatic. There's a possibility that they are, but some of them might have neurological signs. Waterfowl are a little bit more up in the air. But if you do suspect avian influenza, give the Washington State Department of Agriculture the sick bird hotline a call. I have the number listed here. And yeah, make sure that you um, give that number a call if you suspect avian influenza. It can go pretty quickly. So if you do suspect it, please do call. And then I have a lot of resources listed on this page. There are a lot of great information, a lot of great websites and information on different university poultry extension websites. And I typically find pretty much any of the universities that I've come across have fantastic information and articles. Not all of them are going to have the same sorts of topics presented, but if you look at ones I know for certain, there are great articles on like Ohio State and Penn State. I've used some from, say, Oklahoma State, etc. The USDA Defend the Flock link is provided on this page, as well as NPIP if you want to learn more about NPIP. The Washington State Department of Agriculture is here, as well as the avian influenza page of the WSDA that has a lot of information there as well. And then Wattle resources. So all of our tests, diagnostic tests, are listed on the Wattle website. We have 2 locations, one in Pullman, one in Puyallup. I am the one in Puyallup for the Avian Health Lab. Our phone numbers are listed. Feel free to give us a call if you have questions. I also have the Avian Health Lab email address listed here. And also, if you have questions for veterinarians, I would, of course, recommend go and establish a relationship with a primary care veterinarian for your flock, as they can have a wealth of resources tailored specifically to you. So that is my presentation. I know that I went the entire hour, but I welcome all questions. I am glad to have been able to give this talk and hope that you found it helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Elissa. That was a wonderful presentation. I know I learned so much. I'm sure everybody in the room did the same. But to reiterate, we did carve out some time to have questions and conversations. If there are any lingering questions that anyone may have, feel free to jump off mute to ask them or throw them in the chat. There was one that I received of how long should you quarantine new birds before introducing them to your flock?
So the general recommendation is 30 days. That is the recommendation by the Defend the Flock program. That way you give them time to exhibit signs of disease if they are going to exhibit signs of disease, or otherwise, note what their behavior and everything is like.
Wonderful. Anybody else want to pop in and have lingering questions before we close out this evening?
Hi, I was just wondering about if you have any tips or tricks about waste management. So like, cleaning out the coop and like, how do we compost that? How do we get rid of it in like a safe way where it's not going to get into, water or anything like that? That's my main question.
That is a great question. Unfortunately, I'm not a compost expert. Composting is a great way of handling poultry manure and even mortality. But I can't say that I have the knowledge of recommendations how to do so properly. I
Luckily, that's where I step in, and that's kind of my day-to-day and conversations I have with farmers is how to properly manage our manure, our livestock manure in the best way possible. So some key notes is you want to always locate your manure pile in a high and dry location. It should always be covered, whether that's just a tarp. That's the bare minimum that you can do is throw a tarp on it and weight it down along the sides to keep it dry. You want that pile to be as dry as a wrung out kitchen sponge. And so if you take a good fistful of that compost pile and squeeze it, you should see some droplets of water kind of stem out of that good composted material. There are a handful of sheets that I have. I'm going to toss my email in the chat for everybody. Feel free to touch base with me. A lot of times it's kind of troubleshooting your compost pile, figuring out what works best, where it is located. And I have some really great cheat sheets that you could utilize to help you troubleshoot that compost pile to ensure that it's doing exactly what you want. It's a wonderful resource, and when managed correctly, you're able to use it in a lot of really great ways, whether that's the garden beds or throwing it on your pastures. A thing with PCD, along with a lot of other conservation districts, is we have manure spreaders. So folks with larger acreage who have composted material can spread their manures out onto their fields and avoid kind of stockpiling the manures. But the cheap and easiest way is locate it in a high and dry spot that works for you in your chore routine and keep it covered. You can get very fancy with it, and I'm happy to have those conversations, but to keep it simple, I'll leave it with that.
Well, thank you very much.
Of course, feel free to shoot me an email if you want those cheat sheets. We also have a lot of resources on our website that I believe link you to those cheat sheets. If the links are broken, give me a shout and I'll send them your way.
I have a question. Are there any tips for increasing biosecurity in terms of parasites like worms and mites, other than trying not to track in fecals from other areas that could have gotten contaminated or anything like that?
Yeah, so biosecurity wise, I have personally dealt with issues where lice have come in on equipment. So not just your boots and manure and whatnot, but the equipment that you're bringing in, trying to make sure that that is cleaned and disinfected before you bring it into the space that the chickens can, directly contact. Same thing with new birds that you acquire, during that quarantine period and everything. Of course, should be handling the bird, and if you check that vent area and try to look for those mites and lice, you might actually be able to find the actual organisms themselves. And that'd be something to know and want to treat for before bringing them into the rest of the flock. In terms of coccidia, so you can do a fecal float if you're bringing in new birds to see if they are going to be bringing in cocci. But typically in adult birds, that's a little bit less important. It's the young birds that get pretty severely affected by coccidia rather than the old ones. But that one is spread fecal oral, so that one is very much trying to make sure they don't get access to outside birds' manure. And then flies and etc. Flies, mice, etc. can track in the roundworm and tapeworm eggs. So that's where, if you notice that you're having pest issues, rodents, insects, etc., trying to have some sort of management for that can be helpful to reduce the parasite load.
Okay, thank you.
Any other lingering questions? Stop the